Hi, boys and girls. It's Miss Hudson Peck. It's time for our read aloud. I'm hoping this is the best way to do me reading to you. I am having a little trouble figuring out how to just record myself, so I kind of put it together a PowerPoint and had some pictures from the story, The BFG. We're going to catch up on our story first. The last time we were together, we had read about Sophie and the BFG having making up a plan to get the Queen of England to help catch the 9 giants in Giant Country. And the Queen finally believed them. They had a big breakfast, and Sophie was given some clothes, and she got a pin even from the Queen. And they were going to, once they were done eating, they were going to talk to the armies. So the Queen talked to the Air Force and the Army captains and got them on board with what the plan was going to be. So they started flying over to Giant Country following the BFG. Sophie's hidden in his ear as they're running. Once they get there, all 9 of them are sleeping, and they're able to tie them all up except one, and that would be Flesh Lump Eater. Flesh Lump Eater is sleeping in a very interesting position, so it's very hard for them to get his hands tied up. So very carefully, the 6 soldiers are trying to tie him up, and his eyes suddenly open up, and that's when he spots the men trying to tie him up, and he grabs one, and this is where we left off. "I is having early supper today," he shouted, holding the poor squirming soldier at arm's length and roaring with laughter. Sophie stood on the palm of the BFG's hand. "Do something, quick, before he eats them," she cried. "Put that human being down," the BFG shouted. The Flesh Lump Eater turned and stared at the BFG. "What is you doing here with all these grotty twiglets?" he bellowed. "You is making me very suspicious." The BFG made a rush for the Flesh Lump Eater, but he was too strong for him, and he fell to the ground. Sophie's mind was racing. She must do something. She must. She remembered the sapphire brooch, that was the pin the Queen had pinned on her chest. Quickly she undid it. "I is guzzling you nice and slow," the Flesh Lump Eater was saying to the soldier in his hand. Sophie ran up behind the Flesh Lump Eater. She was holding the pin between her fingers. When she was right up close to the great naked hairy legs of the Flesh Lump Eater, she rammed the 3-inch long pin of the end of the pin into his heel as hard as she could. It went deep into the flesh and stayed there. The giant gave a roar of pain and jumped high in the air. He dropped the soldier and made a grab for his ankle. The BFG, knowing what a coward the Flesh Lump Eater was, saw his chance. "You was bitten by a snake," he shouted. I seed it biting you. It is a frightsome poisonous viper. It was a dreadly, dangerous, vinscreen viper." "Save our souls," bellowed the Flesh Lump Eater. "Sound the crumpets. I is bitten by a septitious, venomous, vinscreen viper." He flopped to the ground and sat there howling his head off and clutching his ankle with both hands. "The teeth of the deadly viper are sticking into me," he yelled. "I is feeling the teeth sticking into my ankle." The BFG saw his second chance. "We must be getting those viper teeth out at once," he cried. "Otherwise you is deader than duck soup. I is helping you." The BFG knelt down beside the Flesh Lump Eater. "You must grab your ankle very tight with both hands," he ordered. "That will stop the poisonous juice from the venomous viper going up your leg and into your heart." The Flesh Lump Eater grabbed his ankles with both hands. "Now close your eyes and grindle your teeth and look up to heaven and say your prayers while I is taking out the teeth of the venomsome viper," the BFG said. The terrified Flesh Lump Eater did exactly as he was told. The BFG signaled up for some rope. A soldier rushed it over to him. With both the Flesh Lump Eater's hands gripping his ankles, it was a simple matter of the BFG to tie the ankles and hands together with a tight knot. I is pulling out the frightsome viper's teeth, the BFG said as he pulled the knot tight. Do it quickly, shouted the flesh lump eater, before I is pizened to death. There we is, the BFG said, standing up. You can look now. When the flesh lump eater saw that he was all tied up like a turkey, he gave a yell so loud that the heavens trembled. He rolled, he wiggled, he thought that he was, and he friggled, and he squirmed, and he squiggled, but there was not a thing he could do. Well done, you, Sophie cried. Well done, you. The BFG smiled down at the little girl. You is saving all of our lives. Will you please get that pin back for me? Sophie said. It does belong to the Queen. The BFG pulled the beautiful pin out of the flesh lump eater's ankle. He howled. The BFG wiped the pin and handed it back to Sophie. Now you is all driving over to my cave to load up my bottles of dreams, the BFG said. It's the Queen's order, Sophie said. She was now back on the BFG's hand. So the 9 jeeps drove over to the BFG's cave and loaded up all of his jars of dreams. When he was sure that all his precious dreams had been safely loaded up to the jeeps, the BFG said, Now we is driving to the belly poppers and picking up the frightsome giants. The jeeps drove back over to the helicopters. The 50,000 dreams were carried carefully onto the helicopters. It was a fine sight to see them, these great air machines hovering over the tied-up giants. It was even finer sight to see the giants being woken up by the terrific thundering of the engines overhead. And the finest sight of all was to see the 9 giants squirming and twisting on the ground like a bunch of snakes as they tried to free themselves from ropes and chains. I is flesh bungled, roared the flesh lump eater. I is splits wiggled, yelled the child chewer. I is swog swalloped, yelled the bone cruncher. I is goose groggled, howled the man hugger. I is gun swiped, shouted the meat dripper. I is flunk gungled, screamed the maid masher. I is glop squoggled, squawked the gizzard gulper. I is frod squinkled, yowled the blood bottler. I is Bob Mugrid, screeched the butcher boy. The 9 giants were carried off by the helicopters, one hook on their wrists, one hook from their ankle. Each helicopter carried one giant away. The BFG, with Sophie once more resting comfortably in his ear, set off at a gallop for England. The helicopters all banked around and followed after him. It was an amazing spectacle, those 9 helicopters winged through the sky, each with a tied-up 50-foot-long giant slung underneath it. The giants themselves must have found it an interesting experience. They never stopped bellowing, but their howls were drowned out by the noise of the engines. When it began to get dark, the helicopters switched on powerful searchlights and shone them onto the galloping giant so as to keep him in sight. They flew right through the night and arrived in England just as dawn was breaking. And that is the end of that chapter called Capture. Tomorrow we will be listening to the chapter called Feeding Time. Have a great day.